Indeed, the mayor and the commissioner have been aware of the problems that our findings report. We conclude that there is reasonable cause to believe that BPD engages in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the Constitution and federal anti-discrimination law. BPD engages in a pattern or practice of making unconstitutional stops, searches, and arrests, using enforcement strategies that produce severe and unjustified disparities in the rates of stops, searches, and arrests of African Americans, using excessive force, and retaliating against people engaging in constitutionally protected expression. These violations have deeply eroded the mutual trust between BPD and the community it serves, trust that is essential to effective policing as well as to officer and public safety. The problems in Baltimore didn't happen overnight or appear in a day. The pattern or practice that we found results from long-standing systemic deficiencies in the BPD. The agencies failed to provide officers with sufficient policy guidance and training to collect and analyze data of officer activities and to hold officers accountable for misconduct. BPDs failed to provide officers with the necessary equipment and resources they need to do police safely, constitutionally, and effectively. But these systemic failures alone didn't cause the problem. The police department's zero-tolerance street enforcement strategy became a quest to produce large numbers of enforcement actions, pedestrian stops in particular, often without enough consideration of their limited impact on solving crime and their caustic damage to community relationships. With today's city leaders, and while today's city's leaders have recognized these issues, many in the BPD continue to follow this strategy. Only 3.7% of the police department's more than 300,000 pedestrian stops from January 2010 to May of 2015 resulted in officers issuing a citation or making an arrest. Many of these stops and the resulting frisks lacked constitutional justification, and many of the discretionary arrests were simply street clearing activities. Supervisors at BPD Central Booking and local prosecutors rejected over 11,000 charges made by BPD officers because they lacked probable cause or otherwise did not merit prosecution. The city's African American residents and African American neighborhoods bore the brunt of this activity. Out of the data we surveyed, the police department made roughly 44% of its stops in two small, predominantly African American districts that contain only 11% of the city's population. African Americans accounted for 95% of the 410 individuals the police department stopped at least 10 times. Indeed, one African American man was stopped 30 times in less than 4 years, with none of the stops resulting in a citation or a criminal charge. We also found a pattern or practice of excessive force. For example, officers frequently resorted to physical force when a person did not immediately respond to verbal commands, even where the person was posing no imminent threat to the officer or others. Officers were ending up in unnecessarily violent confrontations with people in with mental health disabilities. We have seen communities throughout the country that improved policies and enhanced training and de-escalation and dealing with people in crisis can actually enhance officer safety and reduce the need for force. BPD also violates the First Amendment by retaliating against individuals engaged in constitutionally protected activities. Officers frequently detain and arrest members of the public for engaging in speech that officers perceive to be critical or disrespectful. And BPD officers use force against members of the public who are engaging in protected speech. Finally, although this pattern or practice investigation did not review the specific circumstances surrounding Freddie Gray's death, we did investigate BPD's transport practices, and our report identifies concerns about the safety risks and lack of data in BPD's transport practices. We also identified deficiencies in the way that BPD investigates sexual assaults. Policing that violates the Constitution or federal law severely undermines community trust, and blanket assumptions or stereotypes about certain neighborhoods can lead to resentment of the police. And resentment can prevent the type of effective policing that is needed to keep communities and officers safe. We found incident reports that documented how witnesses wouldn't share basic information with officers. We read several reports where the person who had originally called the police or needed assistance refused to cooperate after becoming upset by the police response. And when residents don't trust the police, the distrust makes it harder for officers to prevent and solve crimes. Proactive policing does not have to lead to these consequences. When the community trusts the police, residents work with law enforcement to ensure public safety. Effective, proactive policing is community policing. It requires a different set of tactics than those employed by Baltimore for many years. Proactive policing requires officers and residents solving problems to build trust and reduce crime. And I'd like to now take this opportunity to speak directly to the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department. We know that the vast majority of officers in the Baltimore Police Department work hard. They work hard to provide vital services to the community and to abide by the Constitution and federal law. We have seen you run toward danger to protect the community you serve, and we are grateful. We also know that to do your job well, to meet the highest standards of the profession, you need clear policies, you need state-of-the-art training. You need to be supported by today's technology. In the 21st century, that means computers in your cars and other modern equipment to do your job well. You need to have adequate staffing and material resources to get the job done. And you need to know that you will be recognized for the work that you do and treated fairly when your work is challenged. In Baltimore, we see a city that is filled with vibrant, strong communities invested in their future. It's a city that's really determined to engage in the tough but vital work that's needed to build reform. And already Baltimore has begun to build that foundation for reform. The police department has initiated changes to its policies, training, data management, and accountability systems. These are really positive developments and a testament to the mayor and to Commissioner Davis's leadership. To help support these changes during our investigation, the Justice Department's Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services and Office of Justice Programs provided federal resources as well as technical assistance to the Baltimore Police Department, city officials, and community leaders. I want to applaud and commend city officials for their collaborative and cooperative partnership. The Justice Department and the city have entered an agreement in principle that identifies the types of reforms that we plan to address as we prepare to negotiate a court-enforceable, independently monitored consent decree. And by entering into this agreement in principle, the city and the police department have shown their commitment to moving forward expeditiously. The agreement in principle is just a framework. In the coming months, we're going to be using this framework to negotiate a comprehensive consent decree with the city. And in the coming days and weeks ahead, the Justice Department will be meeting with and reaching out to community members and law enforcement to hear their ideas, your ideas about the kind of police department you want to see in your community. And we need the energy of this entire community to help us craft those details in our consent decree and to drive real and lasting change in the city. And so we urge all of you to remain engaged. Whether in Baltimore or around the country, police reform won't happen overnight or by chance. These problems were not created overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to require focused effort and a sustained commitment. In communities across America, even in communities where trust has been broken, we have seen transformative reform rebuild relationships and advance public safety. And in the days ahead, because of the proactive leadership in the city, because of the energy and vibrancy of this community, and because of the police department's desire for reform, together we can shape that same progress right here in Baltimore. Together we can build a stronger Baltimore, a Baltimore that protects the rights